What does it really mean to be an author in the age of AI? We speak to Stephen Marche, who has just collaborated with AI to publish Death of an Author. He'll tell us about the boundaries of what can be achieved when humans and machines work together. Then we speak to Evan Nierman, the co-author of The Cancel Culture Curse, about the real-life consequences of what you say online. I'm Hazem Seeker. This is The Newsmakers. Well, as we see development in the AI industry with machines like ChatGPT-4 and OpenAI, we see as many questions arise. How will these tools be used in the future? Is it ethical to get a machine to do our work, or will we lose our jobs as computers take over? Much of the discussion of these programs has centered around the creative community. Now, journalist and author Stephen Marche has written a book, or at least facilitated the writing of a book by working with machines. It's called Death of an Author and published under the name Evan Nierman. It's not the journalist's first foray into the world of artificial intelligence. He's been immersed in it since 2017, but it may be his best. Let's take a listen to a short snippet from his book.
That night, Gus had a terrible nightmare. He was taking an oral exam in front of his mother and ex-wife. Each time he tried to answer, a different writer's voice came out. William Faulkner, Ernest Hemingway, Jane Austen. Gus sat up in bed, his heart racing, trying to catch his breath. The calm stillness enveloped him as he breathed in the silence. The room was filled with the soft glow of lantern light. The air was heavy with the scent of pine. He lay in bed for some time, trying to calm his mind. In just 3 days, he would be among the mourners of a woman he had never met. He couldn't help but wonder why he had been invited.
Well, joining me now from Toronto, novelist and essayist Stephen Marche. Stephen, thanks for being with us. So talk us through your process then for using AI to create this book.
Well, I used 3 different kinds of artificial intelligence. So I used ChatGPT, which I would I would make very specific requests of it, like write a scene in a novel in simple and compound complex sentences, containing the following information. That would create a text. I would then clip that and put it in pseudo-write, which is a stochastic writing instrument, which allows you to select a text and say things like, make it more, shorten, add details, but it also has a customize button. So you can say, make it more active, make it more conversational, also make it sound like Ernest Hemingway. And by playing around with those 2 things, I was able to get the bulk of the text. Obviously, that took a lot of learning and a lot of trial and error to get to something that was halfway readable. And then I also used a Toronto large language model called Cohere, which I created prompts, like something like create an image of coffee, create a metaphor for coffee, and then I would train it on various examples of coffee, of metaphors of coffee, and then have it generate until it created an image I liked, just so that there were some really beautiful sentences in the novel. And that was the basic process. I mean, there were other different moments called for different things, but that was the basic process.
And what this technology can do is making many writers uneasy and worried, and some of them are probably in this building, that machines could put them out of a job. Aren't they right to be concerned?
No. I mean, I really don't think so. Like, as someone who's just spent 2 months using these machines to make a novel, the idea that your bosses are going to be able to go to a machine and press do this and it's going to be done, especially if you're a journalist, there's just that it's not even. You misunderstand what the technology is. It's a style machine. It can write unbelievably well, but in most tasks, that's actually not the most important thing. The most important thing is seeing what you see, reporting what you see accurately, knowing what you know, and expressing your own opinion. And of course, machines don't really do any of that. So, I think this is a very exciting tool. I'm using it in a lot of different ways creatively, and I think it is a really important future. But the idea that it's going to limit creators or it's going to replace creators, I mean, I cannot see how that would happen with the technology that I've seen anyway.
So our jobs are safer now, is what you're saying.
Well, if you write boilerplate, if you write really formulaic stuff that's really easy to imitate, and you don't bring any contribution of yourself to it, then, you're under threat. But, as like that's been true before there were computers. Like if you're just doing boilerplate, you probably were not very useful in the first place.
Well, one of the things I came across in reading about you is this interview that you did with the New York Times last month, in which you're quoted as saying, and I'm going to read it now, "I am the creator of this work 100%, but on the other hand, I didn't create the words." What did you mean by that?
Well, I mean, we are in this really tricky, we don't have the language to describe what I was doing in this book because, I am absolutely the creator of this work. It's not like some random person could go and make this novel, even with the same technology that I had, right? It comes from my will, it comes from my understanding, principally, of what constitutes good writing, right? And that's what constitutes a good sentence, what constitutes a good paragraph. So I am the creator 100%. On the other hand, like that little snippet you clipped at the beginning of the show, I mean, I didn't make those words. A computer made those words. So what my position is in relation to those words is actually unique. This is not a situation that has ever occurred before where there's a distinction between the creator of a work and the writer of the words, right? And so I think that we are in a very confusing moment, and we don't really have the language to describe what I'm doing here.
So what would you say then to the skeptics out there who say that this is for writers who don't want to put in the time and the effort to sit and go through that, what's considered very important creative process that all authors have to go through to get their manuscripts out there, that it's taking an essential part of the writing process away from the writer?
I mean, it's a tool. I mean, you could have said the same thing about spell check or various formatting devices that existed before. I mean, when I was a kid, people did not think I was particularly good at writing because my spelling wasn't good. And then that era passed, right? I think when people use this technology, because most of the debate is pretty much informed by people who don't use it, right? Like, and certainly don't use it on a consistent basis. Maybe used it a dozen times or something. But when you use it quite a bit, you realize that certain formulaic aspects of writing, like, and certain skills that writers have, like the ability to construct a 5-paragraph essay. ChatGPT is incredibly good at those sorts of things, but writing like a human being, like writing to express will, writing to ask important questions, writing to get at the heart of what is, our experience. This is just a tool to get to that. It's not going to replace at all the human drive to do this. And I mean, I say that as someone who has been amazed by this technology and thinks that, and sometimes feel like I got an alien to write a novella, right? Like there is something very strangely powerful about using this technology, but I really don't think it's a competitor for human insight. I think it's a collaborator.
And would you say this is a technical or a creative process that you go through when you ask these programs to write exactly what you want?
Well, I mean, it is, you have to have a really profound, I mean, not to toot my own horn, but like what allowed me to be able to do this is that I have a PhD in Shakespeare, and they made me do the General Fields examination, which means that I have a very basic understanding of the styles of all different periods in literary history. And I understand how style works. And in that sense, the technical aspects are very real. Like, I think this requires a level of understanding of literary history and understanding of the mechanics of style and syntax and grammar that you're going to need to know those things on a very core level to be able to use this technology effectively. On the other hand, like, if you mean that, I think the technical aspects are really important in terms of using the technology. I access this stuff from a MacBook Air. It's not the technical facility to do it is not hard.
So how does this compare then with other forms of art in the way AI is used?
Well, I think it's a new form of art. I mean, I think right now people like me and other artists are cannibalizing literary forms, right? Like I use this to write a novel, and I've used it before to write short stories and things of this nature. But what it actually is creatively, like what it becomes, will be a new form. Right, it will be a new art form. Maybe creative chatbots. There will be various developments of this kind. And to me, what it is closest to, I mean, the analogies are always imprecise, but I think in a bit it's like photography. Like you are using technology, you have to have a facility with technology to make it. But I also think that the major analogy is hip hop, where you need to understand everything about popular music. You need to understand the technology to make this stuff happen, but also you need a human instinct for what will work when you use the archives and your technical knowledge to get at something new. So, I mean, that to me is the hope that we could be as innovative and as expressive and as new as hip hop.
So picking up on that sense of hope, if I could ask you to sort of look through your crystal ball a little bit, what do you think the job of an author will look like in the future then?
Oh, I think it'll be exactly the same. It's just the tools will change, right? I mean, the questions, the nature of the questions that we'll ask, the nature of the insight that you'll need to understand tradition. I mean, you'll need to understand the mechanics of style. Probably in a slightly different way. You'll need to be more of a curator. You'll need to know be able to express what someone like Thomas Brown is doing or what William Shakespeare is doing to get at literary effects. But it will still be who has good ideas, what those ideas are, and then what does a refined and polished product look like at the end. And those are, I mean, just as painting and photography were different processes, but they both, required an imagistic sense and an eye and correct vision and correct technical facility. I mean, I think we're in a similar transition where the real core values of art will stay the same. The technical means of production will change.
Fascinating subject, and one we'll hopefully learn a lot more about in the years to come. Stephen Marche, thanks very much for being with us. Well, the concept of canceling someone started gaining prominence around 2015. For many people, it was the process of publicly calling for accountability and became an important tool of social justice, a way of combating something or someone bad through collective action. But has cancel culture now spun out of control? It's not reserved for celebrities and politicians anymore. And at the speed social media operates, people are being canceled before the facts are even clear. How dangerous is this phenomenon for the likes of you and me? Well, to discuss this more, I'm joined from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, by Evan Nierman, the co-author of The Cancel Culture Curse: From Rage to Redemption in a World Gone Mad. He is also the founder and CEO of the strategic communications firm Red Banyan. Evan Nierman, thanks very much for being with us. So I want to ask you first off, one of the things you've argued is that when ordinary people are the targets of canceling, the effect on them is far worse than, say, politicians and celebrities. And you talk in the book about the case of Lisa Alexander. And we're going to listen to a short clip in which she's seen. Let's listen to that now.
Hi, I'm asking you if this is your property.
Why are you asking?
Because it's private property.
Because it's private property,
So,
sir.
are you defacing private property, or is this your building? You're free to express your
No,
opinions,
we
but not on people's property.
Okay.
absolutely,
Sure.
just respectfully.
Now, this is a clip that went viral back in 2020 during the height of the Black Lives Matter movement. So, Evan, just explain to us a little bit about the background to this and how her story inspired you to write this book.
Yes, absolutely. And first of all, thank you for having me here to talk about this very important topic, which I think everyone needs to better understand, which is why I wrote the book. Lisa Alexander was walking down the streets in her San Francisco neighborhood. She actually knew a man who owned the house. She saw someone she did not recognize crouched in front of his home and writing on the wall. So she politely walked up and she asked him who he was and what he was doing. He spun around with the camera. He was very aggressive toward her. He recorded the whole encounter. And he was confrontational. And he actually told her, "Why don't you call the police on me?" To which she responded, "I don't want to call the police." He posted this video a couple of days after he took it. He hired a PR firm to promote it, to get it out there. It went viral. And all of a sudden, the narrative that was written was that she was this inveterate racist who was harassing someone. That wasn't the case at all. But the media didn't check the facts. They went with the story. And all of a sudden, she was getting death threats. A mob of people showed up at her house armed with weapons to harm her. And ultimately, it bankrupted her business, shut her down. 3.5 years, she continues to get death threats. But the facts were wrong. She didn't call the police on this person. She didn't instigate a confrontation. She was polite, and she thought she was being a good neighbor, and she ended up destroying her business and almost dying as a consequence. And so when I found out how her story and understood what had happened to her, I was so deeply touched by what she had been through, and I felt enough is enough. I have to do what I can to take a stand against this kind of nonsense, and we have to combat cancel culture. And in order to defeat it, you first must define it. And that's what I sought to do in the book, The Cancel Culture Curse.
Tell us a little bit about that then. How would you define it?
Well, there are really 6 elements to cancel culture. It's the crime is committed against a collective. It's a group of people who get upset. It arises and accelerates quickly. The nature of the offense is actually minor or fabricated, as it was in Lisa's case. It prompts a disproportionate response. So in her case, the ending of her business and a threat to her life. The E in the condemn framework, which helps you remember it, CANDEM, those are the elements of cancel culture. Everyone's afraid to defend the accused. And then the M, there's moral absolutism on the part of those who are doing the canceling. And so when you take all of these things together, really what cancel culture is it's an attempt to intimidate and destroy people as a consequence of their having either ideas or actions that are deemed unacceptable by a morally absolute group.
But hasn't cancel culture, and I'm speaking more generally here rather than the specific case of Lisa Alexander, hasn't cancel culture always been around in some form? I mean, centuries ago, it was being tarred and feathered in the town square. Now it's hashtags and boycotting of advertisers and so on. How is it different today then?
Public shaming has always been around. Witch hunts have always been around, and I cite some historical examples of this. But cancel culture is a new phenomenon, and it is powered by social media. It would be impossible to take place in previous centuries. We've never seen anything quite of this type, because what this does is it uses the interconnectivity of the world, the instantaneous of the transfer of information, and it makes every mistake a permanent one from which you can never recover. And the difference is, it used to be, if you were tarred and feathered, well, you could move out of town. Or if someone made you walk around with a scarlet letter sewn onto your clothes, you could pick up and you could go to a different place. Well, now in the era of the internet, there is nowhere to hide. And you can literally go anywhere in the world and continue to be abused, harassed, or made a pariah because cancel culture has taken its toll on you.
Well, supporters of cancel culture say it is necessary because it, and I know you talk about ordinary people here, not politicians and celebrities, but people who defend it say it's necessary because it levels the playing field, because it allows ordinary people to hold the powerful accountable. What do you say to that?
I say it's nonsense. There have always been mechanisms by which we hold people accountable, whether they're powerful people or not powerful people. It's things like the judicial system, due process. Those have always existed. So this notion that we somehow need to abuse people online, we need to bully them, harass them, destroy their livelihood, and permanently destroy their reputation is nonsensical.
Are there cases, though, in your view, where cancel culture has been effective? I mean, people will point to the convictions of the Hollywood producer Harvey Weinstein, for example, the actor and comedian Bill Cosby, the rich and powerful being held to account.
Those are great examples. They're great examples not of cancel culture. they were convicted in courts of law through a judicial process. And that's what the proponents of cancel culture get wrong. Harvey Weinstein didn't go to prison because these online anonymous keyboard warriors held him to account. He went to prison because there was a trial and evidence was presented, and he was given a fair chance to defend himself. And ultimately, a jury of his peers who were required to withhold judgment until they'd heard a full accounting of the facts, they convicted him. So I think your two examples actually strengthen my point and make the case that we don't need cancel culture to make bad people who do bad things accountable.
As far as the politics of this, when you hear people use the term cancel culture, it mostly seems to come from people on the right of politics. What do you make of that? Why do you think that is?
Well, as in all things, certainly in America right now, and increasingly we see this all over the world, there is no topic that ends up not being political. And the issue with cancel culture, the left likes to pretend that it doesn't exist. They say, oh, cancel culture, it's not a real thing. We deny that it exists. Oh, but if it does, it's good because it's the powerless holding the powerful to account. And on the right, they've made their own mistake by labeling everything cancel culture, whether it's cancel culture or not. But increasingly, what you can see is both sides of the political aisle employing cancel culture. And in the book, the cancel culture curse, I make the case and I take the position, along with my co-author, Mark Sachs, that cancellation on its face is wrong. We have due process. People have the right to free speech. They should have the freedom to express their opinions without fear, without a chilling effect, and certainly without being punished by mobs of cancel vultures. So even though both sides are mislabeling cancel culture, they're both employing it, and they should both stop immediately.
Just to pick up on a little bit of that, if you have a case, for example, where somebody says something that is objectively offensive to a lot of people, and their defense of it is, oh, this is cancel culture, they're trying to cancel me. A lot of people will say that that's just a form of gaslighting and a way to not address the original offense. What do you say to that?
Well, that's part of the problem with cancel culture as it relates to politics, is because the average people, like the Lisa Alexanders of the world, they have no tribe to have their back. Whereas in politics, you have a built-in group of supporters who will support you no matter what. And so it's very easy if a Democrat gets criticized by a Republican or a Republican gets criticized by a Democrat, they can point to it and call it cancel culture, even though it's not, and they'll be backed up. So I think at the end of the day, part of why we have to get rid of cancel culture is the whole notion of apologies has been destroyed by this practice. It used to be that if you and I had an argument and I did or said something wrong, I could apologize to you, you would forgive me, and we'd move forward. What cancel culture does is it takes an apology and it weaponizes it. If I did something wrong and I insulted you and I apologize, in a cancel culture world, you'd say, see, I told you, Evan's a bad guy. He just admitted that he's a bad guy. Therefore, we're justified in ruining him forever. And that's a societal process that we've moved away from that we have to get back to. Because the other thing about cancel culture that's so insidious is there's so much learning that comes from making mistakes, from redeeming yourself, from learning a better way. Every single one of us as humans has made mistakes, and we grow and we learn through our experiences. But what cancel culture does is it eliminates that option and it makes that mistake permanent and it haunts you for the rest of your life.
So how do you combat something like that? Because the forces that you're talking about, that you're taking on, are not weak, to put it mildly.
No, but I remain optimistic and I'm hopeful. I certainly think that this book is going to be part of a process by which cancel culture ultimately gets reduced to the ash bin of history. I hope that we see it not just in our lifetimes, but in the coming years. I think one of the things that you have to do if you find yourself under pressure from cancel vultures is to not kowtow to the will of the mob. And if you actually haven't done something wrong, don't rush to apologize for something you haven't done. Consider who you actually owe an apology to, if anyone. And if no one is owed an apology, then by all means, don't give it, because that's going to be used against you. And I think the fundamental psychological thing that has to happen is that you have to refuse to be canceled. So you can't, in this day and age, it's not enough to hope and pray that a controversy will pass you by. You have to correct misinformation. You have to fight for your own reputation, and you have to be willing to set the record straight and to engage. And that means engaging both with the mainstream media when they come to you and they want to cover you, but also to push back in every way you can. And thankfully, the same things that enable cancel culture to flourish, internet connectivity, cell phones, you've got those same devices that you can then use to defend yourself.
Good to get your thoughts on this, Evan Nierman. Thanks very much for being with us. And thank you for watching. Remember, you can follow us on Twitter and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Hazem Seeker. We'll see you next time.